Hey, my name is Ivy Starnes. I'm a gaited horse trainer in Fort Worth, Texas. So, one of the key tenets of how I train is that when the horse gets something right, say they gait for just a couple steps, I stop and praise. Well, I call it stop and praise. A lot of people call it other things. You can stop and soak. That's a really common one to say let the horse stop and soak. Let them think about what it is. I believe that the training happens when you do nothing, when you allow the horse to think through what you've just shown them. Now, for a lot of riders, or not just riders, but when you train, even on the ground, it's very counterintuitive. We want to ask for something, and then if they get it right or if they get it wrong, we want to do it again. But I want people to understand that they can learn so much in the time of waiting, the time of soaking. And I don't think it's enough for you to let your horse soak 3 times in a session. It needs to be 20 times or 30 times or 40 times. And I believe that the training happens in those moments when the horse can relax and stand there. Now, you have the option of also using operant conditioning or like positive reinforcement or clicker training. With that, you can mark the moment they get it right and reinforce with food. That's an option. You can reinforce without the mark. So if your horse gaits a few steps, you can then slow down, let them go eat some grass. The idea is when they get it right, we want to be able to let them know that they got the right moment. So many of us kind of think that horses are just born gaiting. Like they're born knowing what we want, born knowing that when we squeeze our legs they go forward, but it's not the case. They actually need to recognize we need to have a way to show them when they get it right, especially gaited horses, which are much harder than your walk, trot, canter horses. They can do a variety of movements from pace, stepping pace, even gait, broken trot, trot. And we need to be able, of those 5 movements, to tell them when they get it right. A lot of times it's counterintuitive. You want to just keep going forward. A lot of people are like, well, aren't we punishing them by stopping them? But it's not the case. I have years of experience now and probably over 1,000 horses that this works for. Not only does it help them get it right, no matter what you're teaching, not just the gait, it could be lead changes, it could be side passing, it could be anything on the ground. Giving them that time to soak is where the learning happens. Now, a lot of people ask, how did I figure out stop and praise? And it kind of addresses like why it works, like how I figured out is kind of the why behind it working. So in 2016, I took a 3-week long road trip with my brother, one of my brothers. And we planned along this trip, we went from Illinois up north through Washington State and then back south down through Colorado and then back east. And I posted online and said, I'm going to do lessons. If you want me to stop and here's my approximate route and the approximate times will be here, let me know. And I had, I think, 27 people responded. We did 27 lessons on this trip. And some places we would stop and we just did 1 hour and a half long lesson. That was it. That was all the time I had with this horse before we drove and we're on to the next stop. And so I've got this horse and I've got the rider and I'm trying to do a data dump. I'm trying to tell them everything I can about gaited horses, about their horse in particular, in an hour and a half. So what I found was happening, I'd get on this horse, I'd work him a little bit, and then the rider would ask a question, or I would want to tell them something. So I stop the horse, and I'm looking at them, the owner, and I'm talking to them and explaining, and sometimes it takes like 5 minutes. Like I'm sitting there, the horse is just standing, and I'm explaining to the rider this, trying to just dump all this information in. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna go again, and I'd go ask the horse to continue whatever we were doing, and he would do better. He would figure out whatever I was trying to versus I'd been trying and trying and trying with repetition over and over, and he hadn't gotten it. But when I gave him a chance to stop, when I gave him that opportunity to think about it, to reflect on it, he all of a sudden got it. And this happened over and over and over on this trip. So I was like, well, that's okay. I need to try this. I need to stop more. I need to just stand and do nothing. Now, it's hard when you have an hour or an hour and a half to impress people with your horse training skills. The last thing you want to do is spend a third of your time standing, but it works. And so, but there's a lot of even if not peer pressure, mental pressure, because we're used to seeing trainers do things. They do things to get results, and I was not doing things, and I was trying to get results with that. So I had that experience of doing like 27, 28 lessons on that trip. Really, it was working really well. So then it came time to doing some clinics that fall. And I did 2 clinics in Ohio, 6 weeks apart, and I started to implement this, where I would be working with the horse for 1 hour at a time, individual lessons, and I kept stopping and talking. So what this does, one benefit, cutting in, one benefit that this has is if you have auditors at your clinic, it gives me ample time to answer questions, to talk to people, because the horse is soaking. If you go to a clinic with group lessons, whether there's 4 people in a group or 15 people in a group, the trainer is constantly going from one horse to the next as people need help, which is good because the rider's paid to be there, but auditors also have questions. And if you're always just working with the next horse and the next horse, you don't really get an opportunity to answer. But I found I could answer questions really well because I was stopping and letting him praise. And I did those 2 clinics, and the horses made a ton of progress. And not only did they make a ton of progress in the short time, but horses weren't getting frustrated. I would be working with mares and geldings. Someone would come to me and say, this horse can get frustrated really easily and kind of blow up. And I'm like, all right. But I found that by using this stop and soak, stop and praise method, horses weren't getting frustrated. They weren't getting irritated because they could stand, they could relax, they could think, and they could puzzle through. Dogs, like if you ever train dogs, dogs are quick. You move from one repetition, you move from one repetition to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And you do have pauses in there, but they're ready for the next thing. Horses aren't that fast. They're quite a bit slower. They want to take time to process things and figure things out. But what we see in the mainstream horse training world, we see action, we see movement, we see pushing them from one movement to the next to the next. Now, the goal is not to stop and praise your horse for gaiting every 10 steps. That's not the goal. The goal is to gait your gaited horse down the road, down the trail for a mile, right? But we start by praising those couple steps, because if you don't praise for those couple steps, you don't have a way to help the horse get to a mile. We just hope they do it. And some horses are naturally gaited, but many of them aren't. And so what you need to do is focus on getting your horses to praise for those couple steps, that one step, that softness, that moment where it felt like they were listening, or the moment when they like lifted their back. Like those things, you stop and you soak. Now it's also important how long you stop. Some people stop for 5 seconds, they give a quick pet, and they keep going. That's not long enough. Sometimes it means 30 seconds, sometimes it means 60 seconds, sometimes it means 5 minutes. It's enough time for the horse to start to relax. And it can be long. And I know a recent trainer had posted that she'll sometimes when her horse needs a soak, she'll stop and she'll doom scroll on TikTok. She'll just be on her phone, letting the horse stand there. You can do that. Pull out your phone, look at Facebook. If you're not comfortable sitting on doing that, then hop off, stand there, let the horse think about it. But the horses learn when you give them time to think and process, not by many repetitions in a row. We do repetitions, but we do it with breaks. And then you always ask for a little bit more. Or not always, but you ask for more. You don't always stop for 5 steps. You ask for 5 steps. When they're giving you 5 steps consistently, you ask maybe for 10 steps. And then you go back to 5, then you do 10, then you do 15, then you do 10, then you do 20. And it's a progression, but you have to start for those couple of steps. And so that's how I learned about stop and praise or stop and soak or stop and let them think. And it applies no matter what you're training, no matter what breed of horse. So the next time you're trying to trade something, try to give your horse 60 seconds to think about it every time they get it right. And see what happens. You got this.